here. I just wanted to make sure you had whatever you were doing over there all set up. I didn't
no.
want to disturb you.
I was waiting for you. Sorry about that.
We asked if you're able to please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair is looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented or with any changes requested.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. It's not available. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And Karen, you can hear from Geneva there that,
I'm trying to figure out how to turn her on so we can hear from her, but she does chat, the chat function, so,
she can emoji a thumbs up or down.
yeah.
That works for me. If you just let us know what it is. Item 5 on the agenda is the annual election of officers for the chair and the vice chair. The current chair is looking for a motion for the chair. Sean?
I move Mr. Gerard as chair.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
By acclamation.
All those in
You're
favor?
toast.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your belief in me. It's sorely misplaced, but we'll give it a whirl. The
I don't think so.
chair is looking for a motion for the vice chair.
I'll make a motion for Susan Young.
A motion for Susan. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Aye.
Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Chair is looking for a motion to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from December 8th, 2021.
Chair, I would move that we approve the planning commission meeting minutes from December 8th, 2021.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion or changes to the minutes? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Motion carries. Next up is 355 Broadway Avenue West, the American Legion sign variance permit application. This will be a public hearing, and we'll consider the sign permit application. To refresh your memory, we saw this a few weeks ago, but due to incorrectly notifying for the public hearing, we had to move the meeting till tonight. And before we get to the city presenting, there are 3 variances, and I think I will be looking for 3 motions when we're done, one for each of the variances, just to put that on the table before we even start. With that, Franny, is this you?
Yes, it
The
is.
floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. So as you said, staff received 3 variance requests. One variance request was for sign height, another was for sign setback, and the third was for the sign electronic copy percentage. These 3 variance requests were tabled at the December 8th Planning Commission meeting. At that meeting, Pat Silovich and Mike Kasbaum were here to present on their requests and to provide additional details. Since then, a new public hearing was posted and mailed to the surrounding property owners for tonight's meeting. I just want to make that clear. Also, something to note, the 60-day and 120-day deadline for this application. So the 60-day deadline has passed and it has been extended to 120 days, but that date is February 12th, 2022. Just something to note. Since the Planning Commission discussed the item in December, I will briefly go over the request one more time, but then I'm going to jump to the staff's recommendation and answer any questions you may have at the end. So details of the requests are as follows. If you want to follow along, I'm using the table as a reference in my staff report, just reading from there. So the first variance request is a request of 5 feet from Code Section 153-208L7, which requires signs to be at least 10 feet from the right-of-way, and the applicant is proposing 5 feet from the right-of-way. The second variance request is from Code Section 153-208L2, which requires signs to be at the lowest point of the roof or parapet. So in this case, that's 14 feet. The applicant is proposing a sign that is 16 feet, and therefore the variance request is 2 feet. And the third variance request is from Code Section 153-208L1, which discusses electronic copy. The required maximum is 50% electronic copy. The applicant is proposing 52.5% electronic copy, so a variance of 2.5%. So those are all of the variance requests. Since we discussed them in December, I'm jumping to the staff recommendation. Staff recommends the Planning Commission discuss whether the variance requests meet the findings of fact required in both City Code and Minnesota State Statute in order to approve the variance. If the Planning Commission would like to conditionally approve the requests for signage at 355 West Broadway Avenue, it should make the motions detailed in the staff report. So that was pretty simple and sweet, but at this time I can answer any questions you may have, and also the applicant is here, and I believe wanting to share some information. Thank you.
Franny, there was no change in the application from our last meeting?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions?
I was just going to ask the same thing. It's exactly the same application that we heard
Correct.
before.
Yep, there's
Okay,
some
that's fine.
additional information,
Mhm.
but same requests, yes.
Hearing no questions, would the applicant like to speak this evening? We ask you please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Pat Silovich, currently serving as the First Vice Commander at Legion Post 225. And thank you to the Planning Commission for again having us on your agenda this month. We, with Mike Casbone's excellent help from Think Digital, provided you with updated and kind of reformatted information from when we met a month ago. So we are collectively open to any questions, concerns. Thanking you again for hearing us out with our request.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant at this time?
So can you,
Dennis?
can you, okay, you said that the information was reformatted. I mean, are you just talking about the graphics of the presentation, or
Mhm.
so there was no physical changes at all to the layout or the size of the sign or the
No.
size of the copy or anything? Okay,
Nope.
that's fine. Just want to make sure.
We were very thoroughly satisfied with the end product that we, came with last month.
Kevin?
So I wasn't at our meeting in December, but I've read the minutes and I've went through the notes. I guess when I look at this, my first question is, why are you wanting to place a sign in that location versus up near the corner where there's a lot more room?
Up near
The intersection of Broadway and where Tom's
near
Auto
Third,
is.
near Third
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah.
Well, I
Away,
just
away
wanna-
from where the trees are to the opposite end, where your front of your building is.
Yeah. I think one of the main reasons we wanted out in front of our courtyard area was to be sort of a beacon, a hood ornament, for lack of a better word, for the building and the facility and the post that we are extremely proud of. We we had talked about putting it in the middle of our existing patio area, but it looked, we all thought it looked better pushed off to the far corner of our property near those double doors that enter into Hall A. Appearance-wise, we thought that that was the best place, the best location for it. When this first started, again, going back to roughly 3 years ago, I thought that our sign might actually be sitting up on top of the tallest part of our building overlooking Broadway. But then when you start studying the codes and everything and how they're written, obviously that is not an option whatsoever. So freestanding pole out in front of our building that we thought to be the best location is what we decided to go with.
Thank you. The reason I ask that is obviously, you know, near the intersection, you would not have some of the same challenges we have with the variance requests. Secondly, as I drove by there earlier today, even though the trees right now that are on the opposite corner don't have leaves on them, when I look at the rendering and I see when the leaves are fully bloomed on those trees, it seems to me it's going to obstruct the view of that sign. And it seems to me that that's not a great location just based on that.
Yeah, I can
Because you won't see
appreciate,
it at all coming from downtown.
I can appreciate that, but we're quite confident that if we're allowed the 5-foot setback so that we can be 5 feet closer to the sidewalk and subsequently to Broadway, we will take care of bringing the front end of those trees, 2 fully matured maple trees, into conformity so that when you're heading west, as you come underneath the pedestrian overpass, you'll have a clear line of sight. And in the information that Mike sent out, I think those line of sight vision, whatever the correct word is, the blue line on the one drawing, shows clearly by the time we're done with those 2 trees, the leaves and such won't be an issue. And we'll take it upon ourselves to, after the tree trimming we're ready to take on, we'll make sure that yearly or every other year that growth is maintained so that, yes, we want people that, we're not going to we wouldn't put up a $45,000 sign if we didn't, have the ability for people to see it from as far a distance as possible, whether they're headed east or west. There's roughly 14,600 cars a day that pass the front of our building, and we want to be able to capture the highest percentage of them that we can.
Susan?
I have the same concern because where you're putting the sign now, if you're coming from the west, by the time you see the sign, you have to go to the roundabout and come back in order to get into your building. You'll see the sign and you really don't have time to make that quick turn by the, yeah, you know where I mean. Whereas on the other side of the building, if you're coming from the west, where most folks who are not as familiar with your place would be coming from 35 or coming from the west, then they've got time to see the sign and they've got a couple of choices to be able to pull into your building. And it would also take care of, you wouldn't need the variances. My concern on the variances is every time we grant a variance, it sets a precedent. And you're familiar with the camel's nose, and they all nudge a little bit. And so we have been fairly strong about holding a line unless there is absolutely no other way to configure or to place a sign.
I can appreciate that. I also think that in the overall grand scheme of things, when you look at the 3 variances that we're seeking, to me, in my mind, they all seem minuscule. You look at the height requirement, what we're asking for is so minimal in my mind. The 5-foot setback versus 10 it's still gonna put the front end of our sign well clear of the sidewalk, in line with our own patio. And the third one on size is the most minuscule of all. The tree location seems to be, such a big sticking point, and I really I can appreciate that. Believe me, we all can. We don't want to go through all this effort, and not have a sign that's not visible, but, if the city can entrust the American Legion to run a parade, a 4th of July parade, a carnival, and the fireworks, I think the city can entrust us to take care of those trees so that we can see our own sign and the passing public can see it. Anything else from Mike?
Yeah,
Mike Casbo, Think Digital?
Commissioners, thank you for the additional time tonight. I don't know if we can see some of these other things that I sent over. And
Franny's bringing them up. They'll be on the screen shortly.
okay, I thought a lot about what you said, and I understand and sensitive too when we talk about number of variances. And one of the things I thought about a lot too was, as Pat had just mentioned, and I'm asking you to consider, is the magnitude of those variances as well. And one other comment too that you mentioned, Commissioner Miller, the location down in that corner, there is also a utility box down there. There's also going to be some setback from that, so that creates some other issues down in that corner.
I'm assuming your property line ends right at that utility box?
Well, there's actually a little area that cuts around that, so it brings it in even further. So on the next page, one of the when I went look back at the code, and I'm not the one that's interpreting the code. I'm just reading at this point, and I thought it'd be worth bringing up again when it talked about the lowest point of the roof or parapet. And I'm not quite sure if it seemed ambiguous to me. That parapet is the height that we're looking for the size, the height of the sign. The rest of the building also has, there's higher elevations there as well, but just so it was clear on what we're asking for, we're looking at that, roughly the peak of the parapet. So that would be the lowest point as I read it. Now, my interpretation apparently is different, but either way, 2 feet is roughly what we're looking for. And I think as you look at, if we skip down, if we skip to the next page, let's do the third, I guess it would be in this. One more, if you don't mind. When you look at it from the perspective of the driver in the street, the sign itself, I don't think it's going to look out of place. It actually, with the building behind it, the height of the building, it's lining up with that. And the overall size too, I'm kind of skipping around, but the size, when I looked at the code again, if this building had tenants that they were leasing to, they'd have an additional 40 square feet, correct? So they would have 40 square feet and up to, 80 square feet and up to 40 square feet of digital display. Because they don't have tenants, it's 40 square feet and 20.
Can we interrupt you here at this
Sure.
point? I don't think the size of the sign is an issue with us. I don't think it's an issue. I don't think you need to talk anymore about the size of the sign. I think we're concerned about the location of the sign.
Okay,
We're not concerned about the height of the sign, we're concerned about the location of the sign.
okay.
And I will just tell you that I think that photograph that's up there right now on that diagram is very revealing. And but I think if you were to look at, if you just took your diagram from, your rays radiating out from the point where the sign is and just slid that north, maybe 25 or 30 feet, you'd solve a lot of you're going to have to substantially cut back. I mean, right now, the trees, the way they are right now, and I believe that you will cut them back. I have no problem with that. But it just seems to me that we're forcing the issue here to a certain extent, and I'm just curious, I'm still kind of curious why.
Well, I think when we looked at lines of sight, if you go from the plan view, which is a few more pages further, you'll see, you're gonna have to, it's gonna be the one right, numbered 13. There we go. A little bit hard to see. This gives that overview, that from satellite view, if you will. And those lines of sight, those are one things that we pay a lot of attention to, and trying to figure out what is the best line of sight. As you move in one direction, if you moved to the other end, you know, then you have similar issues on either end.
Okay, what is the issue on the other end? That's what I'm trying to understand, is if we slid this thing, I don't know, it looks to me maybe like 30 feet or 40, is the patio area not that gray rectangle there that's clearly identified on the drawing? Is that the patio area? The extent of it? Or is that something else?
That's a portion. I think the satellite view from Google was before the patio was actually completed, so it's close. Where the sign is, that patio actually angles up towards the doors. So that.
Okay, so it includes part of that white area with the S or that curving sidewalk or whatever it is that goes through it.
Yeah, if you look on the previous, you can have a more recent picture. That one shows a better view of how that patio angles back up and where the sign would be.
I understand where you're putting it now.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to understand is why you couldn't just pick this whole thing up, your diagram, your raise, everything, the location of the sign, and slide it to the north, or I'm sorry, to the west there, and then back to the north a little bit. Maybe not the whole five feet, you know, but and have basically the same lines of sight. The blue line of sight radiating to the southwest looks like it's clearing the corner of the building that sticks out there closer, of your building that sticks out there closer to the street by 20 feet, give or take, maybe 15 or so feet. Mm-hmm. But the proportions of that thing, because it's triangular, you could slide that, your sign point to the west there, backwards, and, I mean, not backwards, but upwards on this drawing, and to the west in the actual dimension, and then slide it back a little bit, and I believe have better sight lines from the south, because you wouldn't have to, you wouldn't have, you come out from behind the tree, you know, and that's, I don't know, it's just what, you know, maybe there's a reason. Is the reason that the sign is there because of that diagonal fence that's in there, kind of that, the position of that?
No, it is for a few things. And one is a line of sight as you're heading east. That would be a better line of sight. From the west, heading out, then it becomes that, you know, the trees. And a couple other things that we think about. They can control the trees on their lot. They can't control what may happen in potential future obstructions on the property across from them. So, you know, we try to keep it towards that center. That gives them the ability to control what might grow, you know, trimming things back. There was also a concern about that.
But what property are you talking about? Because doesn't the American Legion building extend to include that a little bit darker gray square, the smaller one that's closer to the street, or is that somebody else's property? Isn't that whole thing, aren't those two rectangles yours?
which rectangle are you
You,
referring?
well, it would be, it's on the drawing that you're looking, I'm looking at a different drawing, but on the drawing that you're looking at right there, it's the one that's right in the center. That's yours. And then is not the gray, there's a kind of a darker gray or tan, it looks like on that slide. On this other picture here, there's more of a distinction in the color of it. And, but is that not part of your
The parking
facility
area?
as well?
Yeah, that's all, everything except where the cars are at to the left is that auto repair business on the corner of Fourth. And just to the right of those cars is where our Hall D property begins.
But I'm trying to interpret, it seems like we're making a mountain out of a molehill here, and I just, this is just like, we've had multiple sign ordinance reviews in here for one reason or another, and it just seems like we're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I don't see that you're gonna that you have to worry about anybody else on that whole block there, because you own all but the very west, 100 feet of it or less, 60, 70, maybe 80 feet of it? That's all your property there.
Up to,
So I'm still, I'm,
up to
you
the
know,
area
maybe
that,
I'm just being dense and it's time for me to,
I think though, one thing to remember, if we were to relocate the sign further to the west, to the left, we're gonna be running into sightline problems with our own building. Because our main entrance off of Broadway is what where the blue line that runs to the southwest is right now cutting right across the front end of our building. If you move the sign further to the left, 10, 15, 20 feet, people heading eastbound aren't gonna have a good look at our sign until they're already on top of that intersection.
Excuse me, Pat,
This,
if you could
message-
come up and speak here, only because then, you know, the multitude of people listening to us in the airwaves here, we want to make
Okay.
sure they can hear us.
To repeat then, if you consider moving our post and our sign further to the west, we would further disrupt our sight lines to eastbound traffic by obstructing the view due to our own building.
okay, so then let's just address that point then. So this diagram, see what I'm trying to, I'm trying to place credence in what you've presented to us here. And I understand lines of sight diagrams, and this is very adequate, I think, to understand what's happening. And if a wider line of sight, which is kind of what you're hinting at here to me with what you're saying about not wanting to move the sign position to the west, is that you want more, really, you want more of a better line of sight than what you're showing on your diagram. That's what.
As much sight line as we can possibly
Okay,
achieve,
all right,
yes.
that's fine.
And really,
Because we didn't, in my business, when we look at a diagram like this, or somebody comes to us with something like this, the extremes are usually the important thing. How wide this thing can possibly be. And what you're saying with this diagram, and I don't mean to be critical, but is that you really didn't show exactly what you wanted. You want a little bit more than what you're showing. Because if the dark blue sight line, the widest angle, was what you were looking for, then I think my argument holds. But it sounds to me like you're wanting a little bit more than that, and I can understand that.
we are wanting a little bit more. I guess it's safe to say that.
if I can just fill in one part, the angle that you're seeing isn't as much about the angle, it's about the distance. And because of the size of the sign we are limited to in terms of electronic portion, we can only safely and effectively reach out that distance.
So yeah, and I understand. So the length of that blue line is where, the end of that dark blue line is where you're saying then, if I'm understanding you right, is where people are gonna start seeing that sign realistically. Is that correct?
That's when it's large enough where they can, so where it's impactful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah. See, we're not, I mean, Susan has made a good point here, is that one of the reasons we hate to consider variances is because, you know, somebody's always coming with their hat in their hand, and it's not bad. You know, that's not bad, but it also, it stays with us much longer than it stays with you. Because when we make a decision when we render a decision on one of these things, we're setting a precedent. And signs and shoreline setback, you know, they just keep on coming, you know? And so I was, you know, we want to be supported, you know, we're glad for your organization, glad for what it represents, want to be supportive here, but we want to make sure that that we couldn't accomplish exactly what you want to accomplish in a different way without all of the variances. I made the comment last time that if it had been up to me, I would have figured out a way to come in here with fewer variances. I think it just, but it is summa quod summa. It is what it is, and we're considering it as it's being presented here. But you know, now that you're saying that you want a wider line of sight, you essentially want that dark blue line rotated to a more vertical position on the one that I'm looking at and a more horizontal position on the slide that's up there on the screen. I understand why you want to put it there.
Another thing that we could throw on the table, a month ago when we presented, we talked about how nice it was having the shade from those two maple trees with the 4th of July carnival and the food vendors and whatnot. If need be, we are prepared and willing to completely remove the two maple trees to accomplish this.
Well, I hope you don't have to do that, but,
Well, we do
but
too.
they are, you know, I know enough about trees to know that they're close to getting out of hand, because when a tree gets that size, they don't start, these trees are not to the point where they're growing slower. They're growing faster now, you know, and it just,
Yeah,
it is problematic, you know, and I know that trees in this particular location are, you know, even without the sign, they're a problem, are going to be a problem.
They're also very valuable for the Carnival and the 4th of July activities, and that becomes a very prime location for folks during the Carnival and the 4th of July.
So I have a question, and then first I have a couple of comments and then a question. This is a very small zone. It starts literally at your property. To the east of 3rd, you're in a downtown corridor, and this zone only goes down to 8th Avenue, which is the stoplight that you have to use when you come out of like Norman Quacks or something you want to make go eastbound. So that's where it ends, at that stoplight. So it's a very short zone. This will be the only pylon sign in the zone. I thought Big Wheel Rossi was in this zone, but it's across the street. So, you know, I'm trying to get, what do we have here? So everything else is monument signs, and it's probably also some of the area that's prime on Broadway to be redeveloped over the years as we infill between the freeway and, you know, some of those houses will become businesses. We've seen it happen. So it's not a real big zone to begin with. So my question though is, your building, your west end of your building, which is that gray with, it's got a little yellow dot on it. Where does that sit in relation to a setback?
I'm guessing it's right on the property line.
That's my guess, but I want to know for sure.
I think the sidewalk is close to the property line.
I'm guessing that building comes right up to the property line or very, very close to it. I've
Yeah,
driven
where
by
the
it many times.
sidewalk is, behind the sidewalk, there is a rock garden, maybe 2 foot
Yeah,
in depth
So the-
wall, and then there's
yeah.
the wall.
right, so it's a foot off the property line, because the sidewalk would be usually is within a foot of the property line is usually a foot inside the sidewalk.
Page 5 shows that property line.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're right, it's right about a foot
Okay.
from that sidewalk, yeah.
I'm sort of coming around to this 5 feet. I'm not there, but I'm sort of coming around at a 5. I don't care about that 2.5%. We'll need to change our sign ordinance that we moved to these square foot. A lot of technology changes have come since we did the sign ordinances. So that one, I think we're fairly unanimous that we're done with that one. So it's only really the height and the distance back. Can we come up with a compromise number? Somewhere between the 5 and the 10 that you guys can live with? Can you go 7 feet back or 7.5, split the difference?
No, because then they'll be in the middle of the tree.
Oh, you are my arborist.
Just gonna put it back further into this. Would it not?
Yeah, it would, this is 5, it would be, if it was 7, it would be 2 feet further.
To the north.
Correct. Yeah.
They'll be in the middle of the tree.
Doable, we just have to trim more.
Should have to trim more, and hope it survives, yeah.
What I'd ask,
My father always taught me that life is a series of negotiations, and there was often times when I hated it when he was right. So yeah, if we're 7 feet back from the sidewalk instead of 5,
You can live with that.
pardon me, I'm sorry,
we can certainly live with that.
7.5? 7?
7,
Susan, you're saying no?
6.5?
But you're pretty adamant about not wanting to move that sign to the west at all.
This was our chosen ideal in our
Is
minds and
that,
our
is
research.
that primarily because, but it's more for line of sight than or you're concerned about line of sight than it is like messing up the patio or something like that?
No, in fact, one of the things that we talked about, if this indeed is where we could actually extend our patio all the way to the end of our building and remove the slate rock and extend the enclosed fence patio, and that would put the sign pole inside of our own patio. We actually talked about years, not as part of the initial project, but you could actually turn the lower part of the sign pole into a wraparound table for 4th of July elbow resting or what have you. But it would have to be in part of our enclosed area to accommodate that.
Now we're talking.
We had,
And the 16-foot height, is that to that, I'm not sure it's actually a parapet, is that the little bumps that come up?
Yes.
It'd be,
Well, the
it'd be,
parapet
Architectural
All
parapets,
of the, architecturally,
yeah.
the parapet is everything that extends up above every part of the exterior wall that extends up above the roof surface itself.
the bumps. In this
This
case,
case, it is
No,
the
not
bumps.
the little triangle things. No.
no, I think
But-
they're telling me
so
that they're
why-
gonna put this on, where's the front of the building?
Go away if it was.
See, if you go to page 23 of the staff, oh, here we go. Aren't these, where the flags are hanging, aren't those?
Those are the architectural parapets.
And you're not gonna be any taller than the top of that parapet?
No, we
Right.
are.
Right at the top of that, the tip of that parapet, that's 16 feet.
And one of the main reasons, going back to a month ago, one of the main reasons for that request was for safety reasons, getting the base of our sign higher.
Now we're gonna put a drinking table around there, the sign's even better shape. I don't know. All right. All right. Kevin?
Well, even if we move the sign down to the west and put it in the patio, it's still not gonna meet the setback requirements.
You are correct.
So that's why I put them through all the work.
Oh, I like the little-
Hey, would Tom's Auto lease you guys a piece of his land on the corner there, and you could just put it on the very corner? I mean, that would be a simple solution. You know, we lease cell towers out all over town.
If you would let us put it where our existing old sign was, we'd love that, but it would be hanging right to the edge of the curb.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, this is a public hearing, so we'll come back, we may come back to you guys for more questions, but we do have a public hearing to hold this evening. The way that'll work is that we will officially open a public hearing. We will ask anyone who wishes to speak to this issue to please come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, spend a couple minutes telling us what you think of this variance. If they're online, they will speak from the ceiling to us. Once we have heard all parties who are interested in speaking, we will close the public hearing. It'll come back then for more discussion and a decision by the Planning Commission. So we'll officially open the public hearing at 7:44 PM. Does anyone wish to speak to this application? Sam?
Good evening, Planning Commission members. Tonight I'm going to wear two hats. My name is Sam Husnick. I live at 86th Street Northwest here in the city of Forest Lake, currently serving on the city council. But I'm also a life member for the American Legion. I think their argument has been more than adequate. What I'm here to tell you is that I'm really glad to hear that there's been some consideration about reviewing some of these ordinances. One of the things was the technology thing where we're that close, where the new technology demands that we need to really look at that, you know. The other thing too, as far as the height of the sign is concerned, it just seems to me when we worked on this thing 25 years ago. Come on, Paul.
Don't remind me, Sam.
That we always use the mean height of a building, you know, the mean height of the roof. I think some cities do that. So in other words, you know, you got kind of an average height that you can use, and it's not more to accommodate. And so all I'm saying is that there's several of these ordinances that I'd like to see us take a look at them and review them again. And it's been a nightmare for 25 years or more, but we have to continue on and try to keep up with the times, I guess, if nothing else. As far as the setback, I think the request for the setback, I don't know what else you're gonna do there. You know, it's just one of those things where the building is up to the lot line, it's been there for 100 years. The newer part is back a little bit, but anyways, I just wanna make a couple comments about how glad I am to hear that you actually reviewed that and took that into consideration for the extra size of the sign because of the new technology. So thanks, appreciate it.
You. Anyone else wish to speak to this? Sir, come on up. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. Jerry Pelletier, I live in Finley Court, lifelong resident of the area, and I think I like the job you're doing, looking at the future and not the past so much. One of the things I'm encouraged about with this sign is the technology that it's adding to a corridor. What we say, at 14,000 cars a day? That sign is capable within a matter of 30 seconds by the staff inside that Legion to go on the computer and put up emergency messages. And I think as a community, I see value in seeing that that sign is appropriately positioned for line of sight and clarity. Because if we suddenly have to put up a notice up there that some little girl's been run off in a car, we don't want to have people missing that opportunity. If we're flashing an emergency out there, it should be seen. And I'd like you to roll that into the thinking. We got an opportunity here to add some intrinsic value to the community itself, not just the Legion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to the issue? Karen, do we have anyone online who would like to speak?
No, there's no one. Geneva had just asked if they move the sign, would they still require a variance? If they move the sign, as Dennis is suggesting, would they still need the variances?
As long as,
Was answered that
if the
yes.
sign is at least 10 feet back, they would not need a variance. Anything shy of 10 feet, they will need a variance.
Yep.
We're just discussing distance. Any emails on this subject come in?
I have nothing else. Nope.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask one more time, does anyone wish to address this application? And Karen, I'll ask you one more time, has anyone come online to want to address it?
No one.
Thank you. So, seeing no one come forth and no one online, we will close the public hearing at 7:48 PM to bring it back to the Planning Commission for further discussion and motions as desired. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
At the point of order here, okay, let's just say we, we talked for a few minutes here about a compromise, and I'm wondering if, how that is handled when you have, can we grant a variance for 7 feet instead of 5 feet, or, I don't want to just do it to be belligerent, but if we can agree here that there's a way to make this thing work, 5 feet, they don't have to go, we don't have to table this thing and come back and do it another time, right?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, the planning commission can approve a variance less than 5 feet.
So we're not limited to what the
Right.
wording of this is.
We
Okay.
just have to put it in the motion.
I'll make a motion that we, where do you want to start? Which one do you want to start with? Does it matter? Let's start with the non-controversial. Let's start with the
Hold on a second, let's,
the electronic, the 2.5% increase in the electronic.
how about
Would I
if we
make a
go
motion that we approve that variance?
page 13 is the staff recommendation.
Okay, okay, I'm sorry, let me,
So we would have whichever those are, and then typically we tack on the, with the conditions. So we'd be looking for 3 motions. They don't have to be in this order to answer your question. Page 13.
Would you like me to make the motions?
All right.
Commissioner Batty, would you like me to?
I'm going to start at the bottom, if that's okay. Motion to approve a variance to the percentage of allowable electronic signed copy to a total of 52.5%, subject to conditions proposed by staff. And there are 4 conditions.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Aaron, can you tell me how Geneva voted?
That I,
Motion carries unanimously.
No, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve a variance to construct a sign exceeding the maximum sign height to a total height of 16 feet, subject to conditions, the four conditions proposed by staff.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? How did Geneva vote?
She says aye.
Motion carries unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna get this out, we'll get it out here, and if we need to discuss it more, we can. Motion to approve a variance to construct a freestanding sign within the required setback area to a minimum setback of 7 feet from the public right-of-way, subject to the four conditions proposed by staff.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I'll second. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? How
She
did-
says aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-1. So moving forward, this is in a sense your final stop. If you agree with the decisions made by the Planning Commission tonight, and no one in the public comes forward and wants to contest it, it'll stand as it is. You're welcome to put your sign up. If you're not happy with the decisions, please submit a letter to the city within 1 week, and then they will put it forward to the city council to review it and to make the final decision.
You can appeal to the city council.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good luck with your project. You guys do a great job in the community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Item 8 is the MXR1 zoning discussion on zoning district lot standards. This has been an ongoing discussion we've had, and I'm sure that we're going to be dazzled once again with further information.
That may be a strong word, but I hope that we have enough information for you. This, yeah, as you say, Chair, continuation of an ongoing discussion. Bringing a presentation up here. So at the city council, the Planning Commission's last meeting, there were a number of different topics of discussion. I kind of summarized them in the staff report with kind of brief lines. There are a few items that are explored a little bit more in depth in the staff report. At the last meeting, lot widths were discussed. We talked about potentially there being some comfort with going down to a total of 65-foot widths. There was some conversation about trails and sidewalks and ensuring connectivity in future developments to the existing trail and park system. Density was discussed at the last meeting, along with parks and parkland dedication and residential facades. And those three areas that I just listed, I covered a bit more in detail in the staff report. I'm gonna jump into parks and parkland dedication and leave density for later in this presentation. Regarding parks and parkland dedication, the Planning Commission discussed basically the city's ability to require more of developers when they add or have higher density developments. There are basically two suggestions that staff has in order to ensure that adequate parkland dedication is provided to the city. One option is the city requires all 10% of land in developments to be dedicated, as opposed to a combination perhaps of parkland dedication and cash in lieu, or in some cases, all cash in lieu has been accepted. Another strategy the city could use to basically get more funds for the establishment of new parks is to increase the unit fee, which currently is $2,500 per residential unit. So those are kind of two areas that the city can look at to generate more either parkland or cash. A couple comments. There was some discussion about, when we have higher density, well, should we increase, perhaps have a tiered structure in the code? And actually, one does currently exist for developments that have over 6 units per acre. Any additional unit per acre would require an additional percentage. So in a 7 unit per acre development, 11% would be the required parkland dedication. Before I move on that one, are there any questions?
Percent of what?
The developable area of the development. So parkland dedication, when you,
Oh, okay.
you know how that works? Okay.
So the net high then? It's off of the net high, or is it off the total acreage? On the,
That would be
It
out
gets
of,
off the developable
the-
acreage minus wetland and.
right, the net developable acres.
and then is that all highland or?
So areas that are not developable, including like steep slopes and bluffs, would not be accepted by the city. And they would be
As part of the land dedication?
correct.
Okay.
No climbing walls.
So if there are any other questions, I can answer those. Otherwise, I'd move on.
So why are we discussing park dedication fees? Is there some concern by someone that they're not adequate, or?
That was I brought this up.
Okay.
And the reason being that as we are getting more dense, with more houses per area, do we need larger parks? Was one comment. Do we need more parks? Do we need larger parks? And so I asked for it to be thrown out there. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong,
No,
but just
no,
to see where
I
we
get it.
sit and see if we need to modify it. There was also discussion on that same, we discussed the parks, well, maybe we just get more trails instead, or we get sidewalks on both sides of the street. So I'm not saying at all that we have to change this, but I
No.
think as we,
No, I understand where you're
as we
coming
start looking at this, what other areas in this do we affect?
Well, there's one area here, one aspect of this whole park dedication thing, I think that needs to somehow be factored in here, but there has to be a point where the law of diminishing returns kicks in on the low end here of this. And there's got to be a minimum size of property dedicated for property that makes sense. At least on the surface, to me, it doesn't make sense for the city to develop a whole lot more smaller, mostly smaller parks. I think we need to figure out a way to get larger parks.
I just had a point on that. With some of the potential developments that staff is reviewing, there is definitely a concern for, how do you don't want to just require a park any old place. If you have developments that are going to be abutting each other, it would make sense to have the parkland for each of those parks be congruent so that the maintenance and the use is all a little bit more streamlined. So it's just, I guess, maybe a point or a note for you.
Contingent, not congruent.
Contiguous?
Contiguous, contiguous, not
Apologies.
congruent. Congruent is they'd all be the same shape.
Yep.
And/or it could be just money that you could take
Sure,
for the city and eventually do a larger park if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, in some circumstances that is maybe the
smaller
better
park or
path. Yeah, with smaller developments, maybe there's developments that are abutting some place where there's a large enough park.
And the only issue with taking money has been the history of when we take money, we don't buy the land. And land is expensive. buy. So it's much easier to ask for the land first.
Oh, really? Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, that's
Makes
obviously
sense.
something that needs to be considered. I mean, is there, I'm just wondering if there's a way that a formula could be developed that would kind of somehow bring some of these other factors into play.
Such
I-
as,
Well, this whole thing, I mean, the thing with size, type of property, you know, I mean, the topography of the property, the elevation of the property, you know, from the standpoint of whether it's wetland or not, those kinds of issues. Maybe not, maybe it's just it'd be interesting to hear how the park,
well, on a staff level,
Commission
before we
feels
bring it to
about
the
this.
park commission, we try to outline and make a solid recommendation to them regarding what size the park is, how and where it should be located. I mean, we will not accept land that are just, it's wetland and non-usable, we just won't accept that. And we realize as well that a half-acre park in most cases isn't a good park. It's, you know, unless you're putting a top lot in somewhere. So we're cognizant of trying to make them larger parks. And like Nathan said, as development, especially on the south, comes together, we're trying to match the park, the parcels that are being developed, and so that we have 3 acres here, 3 acres here for that development, another 3 acres, so it's all, so we do get a larger park. Maybe I think we're agreeing with somewhat of that smaller parks don't always do well.
so the process right now, but as far as the park commission or staff at least weighs in on particularly a development, I mean, that's kind of what we're,
We have pre-development meetings with the developers, and we try to come up with that solution before we get to the park commission. So that basically we're not negotiating against ourselves,
yeah,
if you understand.
That makes
So,
sense.
and then the park commission, as an advisor, will say if they like it or don't like it. We think we're pretty intuitive on what the needs are, and for the most part, do a pretty good job with that.
Susan?
You can get those negotiations through a PUD process. As long as you're not,
Yeah.
and just full disclosure, I've been driving around, I've been looking around, I've been mulling this over, and I can't support these densities that we're talking about in MXR. When Donovan was here, he said, well, if we don't cut the densities in half, we'll have to go back to the Met Council. And that's not correct, because the Met Council reviewed our existing zoning regs and zoning rules. I realize that some of us grew up on lots that are much, much smaller than this. Some of us. And they were cool, and that was where we chose to live. But Forest Lake, and I said this at the last meeting, what do we want to be? Who do we want to be 20 years from now? And if Forest Lake decides it wants to be Blaine, or it wants to be the Hugo, you know, the way that they're developing now, or we want the city to, we're very happy with what I call the horse area, the Appaloosa and Arabian and Pinto Way. That's kind of what we're looking at, smaller, more dense than that. If that's what the majority of the city wishes to go to, that is what it is. But at this time, I cannot, especially with the huge area that we have now been stuck with, that is MXR, I don't see a benefit to the city. I see benefit to developers, but I don't see a benefit to the city of this kind of density in about a third of what we're looking at as our developable area. And,
so it's that high, huh?
yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, we've got this corridor around 61.
Well, what would be some benefits, right? I mean, more tax revenue?
Well,
A house costs the city about 1.5 times, Patrick, you've said 1.6 times, the amount of tax revenue we get.
Okay.
So with this kind of
service it.
density, we're looking at a tremendous increase in the need for our police department. We're gonna need significant increases in water, in our sewer needs, in our public snow plowing needs. We're probably gonna have to look at going to at least some full-time firefighters just because of the amount. And that means that because we don't have a lot of commercial or industrial development here, that the tax increases for all that are all on property owners. When we had the developers in here, they weren't saying that anything was gonna be more affordable. These lots they were looking at, these size lots and the houses that they would put there, minimum 600 to 800,000, and then you're going up. So we're not getting more affordable properties. I have driven and I have looked and I have tried to think about Forest Lake and the folks that move here. They want to be able to do the snowmobile stuff, and they want to do the lake stuff, and they want to ice fish, and they need room to put those things, those toys, along with their 2.5 cars, because they're not one-bedroom homes that we're talking about. I don't see advantages to the city that keep Forest Lake being something unique. I don't see a benefit to the city in terms of affordability of more affordable homes. I don't see an advantage to the city as we look at our permeable areas and the kinds of stormwater facilities that we're going to have to build and maintain. I don't see those benefits. So I'm going to keep listening politely. I'm going to keep trying to make this work in my head. But I don't see a benefit to the city and to the city's future of doubling the density in the MXR areas.
So after hearing that, what would you say then are the benefits to the city?
Pretty close, spot on. I mean, when you make it more dense, you obviously have more people, so you have more traffic. You make it somewhat affordable, more affordable, but these days that's relatively probably small. Basically, you just get a bigger population and a more of a neighborhood feeling, more like a city than a country, but more people, really. I think a benefit is the eyes of who's looking at it. Obviously, a denser development favors the developer more than it favors the city.
Correct.
So
Does a greater population benefit the city in terms of attracting business, attracting commercial
well,
business?
somewhat. When large businesses look at coming to a community, they look at the number of rooftops, they look at income, and so forth and so on. For example, if you want a Costco here, they look not only, mostly the first thing they look at is how far away the last one is, but then they look at how many households are within a certain radius to qualify, and then what the income is. I mean, that's what most of these large businesses look at, rooftops and income.
But the cross on that is, where would you put a Costco here? I mean, that is not residentially zoned. I mean, we've got that MXR. We don't have, we're hanging our hat on hoping to get the development down there in Headwaters with the data center type thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But we don't have a place to attract the next Tesla plant.
So you think it's more beneficial to change the zoning?
But what is changing the zoning change? It doesn't change any of the points that Susan raised about benefits to the city.
Unless you decide to take that edge down by Hugo and you change the zoning to an industrial commercial.
Correct. Because now you have an opportunity to bring that
Right.
into the community.
And you continue that corridor that really all that Forest Lake has done to mimic the Hugo corridor is Vinco.
Right.
But you bring
Kind of
that
like what
corridor.
Columbus is doing to us.
Right, right, exactly. And staff has put in a huge amount of time on this, and I've worked really hard to try and get this in my head to where I believe it's a good thing for the future of the city. And I can't get there yet. I just can't get there. I don't see long-term benefits to the city and the residents of Forest Lake of doubling the density in the MXR areas.
So let me just bring up the other side of the coin here that I have put some thought into. And that is what I'm going to call keeping up, and I believe that there's, and I'm not necessarily talking about keeping up with the Joneses, that type of keeping up, because I mean, if we're going to attract a big data facility or something like that, it's right now with the conditions that exist just in the north metro here. And I'm not talking about south or west or east or I'm just talking about the north metro here. We're a long ways down the road because there are many more. I mean, the 610 corridor is not fully developed yet. It's about what, maybe half to 2/3 somewhere, but not really 2/3. There's still huge chunks of almost perfectly flat, very developable property there. And, companies I mean, you can just see what's happening in Brooklyn Park and Maple Grove and Blaine and that sort of thing, because there's all of that land that's right, that our problem is Columbus, and it's nothing wrong with Columbus, it just happens to be where it is, we don't have this direct access. So until somebody doesn't care about that, they're not really gonna look hard at Forest Lake for that kind of thing, I don't think. I mean, I've done some talking to developers here, and just to ask them how they feel about this matter of like keeping up with maintaining infrastructure, streets in particular, that sort of thing. And how that affects how a developer looks at coming into an area. And they give it consideration, but they don't give it as much consideration as I thought maybe they might, But
They leave as soon as they build their houses.
yeah, right. So, we don't, this may sound terrible, but we don't have to have pristine roads to get developers to come in and want to build houses. We don't. But, I mentioned it, and I don't want to beat it to death, but there's a tipping point, and we've all seen it in other communities, particularly small rural communities. There's a tipping point that comes when you don't keep up your infrastructure, and it starts a downhill slide that is really hard to turn around. I mean, momentum is a really important thing, and that's what I have wondered here is, how does momentum come into this whole process of striking a balance between making it inviting for a developer to come in and want to build houses, and us keeping up with in my mind, there's kind of two areas when it comes to infrastructure. One is maintaining what you have, and the other one is being able to develop the new or expand what you have to be able to accommodate what's happening new in either business or residential. And I know that's not an easy question, but I really don't know what the answer to it is, because there are, particularly in a large metropolitan area like this, there's a lot of different approaches being taken to that. I mean, you go down south and they've got pristine roads for the most part. You go through Egan and those communities down there that are directly south of, you get outside of Edina and Bloomington and south of 494 there, and they have done a darn good job of keeping everything look nice. And I'm not saying that it's terrible up here and that sort of thing, but we're not I think we're slipping a little bit on maintaining our roads and stuff like that. And I'm just wondering, and I realize you can't just it'd be nice if we could just isolate one problem and solve that problem, but you can't do that. That doesn't work in a community, because there are just so many different aspects of this that we have to, I've, I guess I'll use the word lamented, what's happened to North Shore Trail. It's just, in my mind, it's a really big problem, and it's just kind of getting worse, and we got to do something about it. I'm not saying that it's totally the city that has to do that, but, we need to do something, and.
It's a city street now, it's not a county road anymore.
Well, that's right, I guess, so maybe it is just the
I would
city's
agree that challenge of keeping up your roads, we're right in the middle of it. We have a big challenge, and we've been trying to address that for at least the last 3 years. As far as new development goes, that's on the developer. We do not put new roads in their infrastructure, and they are responsible for putting
Right,
all the infrastructure in.
and I
So
understand that. And
we've
don't
got
take my,
that.
don't
No,
take
no,
my,
no.
yeah, don't take my comment as an insult or that I'm
No,
mad at
I don't
somebody
get
or
insulted
upset.
easily.
I just understand these dumb roads in this climate,
No,
they eventually fall apart,
roads are a challenge, and the city has been a little behind the 8 ball with keeping up on their roads. There's no doubt. And it's, if we had, last figure was $32 million, we could have some really nice roads, but we have to find a way to incrementally do that, and that's what we've been working on for a while. So it's a challenge, and not only this community, but all communities, because, once you hit the 20 to 30 year road age, it starts to really go down fast sometimes. And you're right, this climate, you can turn a road from a nice road to a miserable road in one season. So.
And the trouble is that once you grow real fast and you do this density thing, that just gives you more things that you have to take care of. You better be doing some crack seal, you better be doing some mill and overlay in those first 6-10 years. And I will tell you that the northern suburbs and Forest Lake in particular, we are not folks that like to be taxed to take care of our maintenance needs. We just aren't. I happen to work for a city that is over 300 years behind when we look at the roads we have to rebuild, it's going to be 300 years before we're going to be able to get to the roads that we should have done 20 years ago.
At the rate you're doing it.
There's no money to do
No,
it.
I
So,
understand. No.
but my concern is that getting a lot more houses and significant more density is not going to help us with those maintenance and future cost needs. It's going to turn it in the other direction.
So
There's
bringing us,
not a formula for
No.
additional taxable, property tax value. This is what people throw at me, is, they're building all these new houses. That means there's all this
no,
new
there's
there's
study
property
after,
tax coming in,
study
stuff
after
like that.
study shows that it
And I know
costs
that.
more for a house
Yes,
and businesses pay the freight.
yes.
That's the reality, and we don't have enough businesses paying the freight.
And I don't know that I don't know that we can overcome this kind of separation thing from, arterial, highways and traffic and, that sort of thing to overcome that. I guess I hate to be negative, but I don't know. There's just so much other property that's better positioned that is gonna get snapped up first and before we're gonna be able to, I think, make significant strides in that. I guess I've kind of come to that conclusion.
And 30 years from now, that's going to be used up, and then our properties and our land are going to be, even more desirable. The other thing is, being a farm girl, if you use up all your land in the relatively short term, then you don't have folks that are going to be building here and creating jobs and doing building things, 10, 15, 20 years out. Most people don't think about using up land, but I'm not sure that
Well, I understand that
we,
concept. Oh,
we
yeah.
need, I don't think that we need to be in a real big hurry to say, let's go real dense and build everything out right now.
Well,
And I don't think we're saying that. We're saying, I think, is let's take a look at this district and see if we should be doing something different.
Okay.
So to rein it back in, I appreciate you guys have solved most of the world's problems in the last 15 minutes. But if we can roll her back to a much more microcosm area, one of the things, and so now that we've thrown your whole presentation out the window, thank you very much. I had asked Nathan if they could look into what have we actually been approving to sort of see where are we at. And I don't know, but I thought that it would help if, are we actually approving everything that's already smaller? And so this is just following up that it's getting us where we already are? Or am I way off base here? So that's why I asked him to do it, and I have no idea what he's presenting here. So Nathan, it's once again all yours.
Thank you, Chair. What's you can see on the screen right now is what information we were able to find on major subdivisions that have been approved since 2010. These are things that we found in the city's records. So the information provided on this slide shows the standards that were associated with these developments. Anything shaded in blue is something that would not be up to the current city standards, and they were likely approved through the planned unit development process. So as you can see, a number of the developments did not require PUDs or deviations, and a few of them did. So it looks like in terms of the common, for those developments that did require some deviations from the city code standards, minimum lot size was one of those, ranged from over 7,000 square feet per lot to 12,000 or just a little bit over that. Minimum lot widths are ranging, I would say wildly, from 47 at a minimum to 80 at the top, 55 to 80 in Chestnut Creek. And then side yard setbacks were another point where deviations are required, and they ranged from 5 feet on a side yard in circumstances where there's a garage, and 7.5 feet to 10.
Susan?
If we keep our MXR where they are, we still have the ability, if somebody is willing to come in and say, we're going to commit to X number of houses as part of a PUD that are at 80% AMI. Or we're going to commit to do something for the city to the benefit of the city, more than just a trail that links to someplace else. We have the ability to go more dense. The other thing that really concerns me is if we do these proposed densities on the MXR, then we're going to start doing the PUDs even denser. Remember that camel's nose thing? We're going to get pressure to be even denser. We have the ability to get dense in special situations where it would be a real benefit to the city, where we could get something out of the density. But if we're already pretty darn cramped, and folks are saying, well, I can't come here and develop unless I get even more, then we're back to city lots. And I don't think that we think of Forest Lake in terms of city lots or first ring lots.
Do you think we lose opportunities from developers because they look at our standards and go, we can't build we couldn't build on a 7,000 square foot lot? Or do you think they just pass us over because they don't
Frankly, it is possible that a developer will decide to forego a development because they can't make it the development pencil. What that means is they feel that they need a certain number of lots to realize a return on their significant investment. And they, maybe a neighboring community or somewhere else has standards that meet what they need.
Do you feel that if someone was seriously looking at Forest Lake, would they call the city and have that discussion with you and say, what's your planning commission like? Would they be open to something like this, or should we just go somewhere else?
I think that's a really insightful question. The purpose partly of the pre-development meetings that the city holds with developers and partner agencies is to identify some of the challenges that are perceived with a development, and will certainly not throw a concept or sketch plan that they give us away because the standards don't meet the zoning code. We're gonna have a conversation about, what you're proposing doesn't meet the standards. This is the process that you need to go through, and this is what we've heard from the Planning Commission in the past.
Here's what we've done in the past. So you would potentially
It's
get that
pretty common,
conversation?
actually, yeah.
Okay.
And I guess that gets back to the policy thing of we could cut our minimum lot areas down to 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. And we could have, developers coming out of the out of the woodwork. What does Forest Lake want to be? How do we see ourselves? And as I look around and as I drive around and as I talk to people, if they wanted to live on 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lot, there are places to do that. And again, is there a reason that we're not willing to say, okay, developer, you can go someplace else, and 5 or 10 years, you're probably gonna wanna come back here. I'm a really competitive person. But in terms of being competitive to get the biggest number of developers cramming the largest number of houses on property, to me, that's not a game that I want to be competitive in. We got a planning commissioner online? Has she been?
She had asked about infrastructure, and doesn't the upkeep of the roads, once a developer has installed them, the upkeep falls to the city?
Correct.
And I just answered, yes, it does.
And as we heard tonight, all the ponds too.
And
Yeah, you missed the one pond discussion.
Darn, how could I have missed it?
Nathan had plenty of business cards,
I
so
have
life was
pond
good.
discussions
Give
with
'em all
my
away.
neighbors. Area where the only storm sewer is ponds.
To me, in reality, in the MXR1, the bulk of this is going to be in, like we had at the 6 o'clock meeting, which one is it, Chestnut something or another?
Hidden Creek was the neighborhood meeting earlier
Hidden
today.
Creek, where they're coming in, they're developing whatever that, 30 acres, 40 acres. I don't think we're really looking at the guy who wants to build 2 houses, it's gonna, so potentially a PUD may be the way to go instead of shrinking our lot sizes as a compromise. But then we would really need a list of what gets you something smaller. The idea, like you say, that
Absolutely.
it's just a trail, that's not gonna cut it, If I'm gonna allow more density, maybe I not only need the parkland, but I need the park developed. Or I need sidewalks on both sides of the street.
And I think we've kind of sold ourselves a little cheap in the past.
No, we kinda haven't, we have. Oh,
Yes, we have.
yeah, and
And it's been, well, that developer might go away if we didn't. So where's the loss?
Always want to win. It's just a problem. But
What
I'm
do you
not
wanna
sure,
win?
that's the problem. What is a win? You know, I don't have a problem with smaller lots. But I want good development with those smaller lots. I want streetscape where I don't just look at garage doors, but I have a room off to the side that no one ever uses, but it looks nice from the street. And it's a dining room or an office or a den or something. I don't have one of those. So I guess I really don't, it doesn't matter to me which way we get to smaller lots, but something tells me we want the same thing here. We just haven't been able. You are much more eloquent explaining what you need.
Chair Gerard, Geneva asked, can we develop a list of wants and/or benefits we would like them to we would like developers to consider?
I think we absolutely can do that, and what I would like to do is I would like to know, what would the park board like? What are we gonna need in terms of our watershed district? The other thing is, we got shot down a few years ago saying, look, you're gonna have this piece of the development, and we know that there are gonna be other ones here. Eventually, once you get 3 of those developments, we're gonna need a new intersection, a new signal. And we wanted folks to put in dollars for that. Well, we got shot down on that, and we lost that. We had to pay money back. But I would like to see if we can put something together for, yeah, we're gonna need another well. You're just a little piece of it, but we're gonna need that. We're gonna need something to deal with on stormwater. We're gonna need that intersection. We're gonna need that roundabout at 202nd. You know, is there a way that we can get some of that then we could grow so that we're not 300 years behind on street maintenance?
So the biggest reason we would be looking at proposed changes, as I'm reading a little bit more, is just to avoid doing PUDs. Basically.
Part of that is a philosophy of, do we want to have development come in and just be able to develop, obviously we have to go through the plating process, but to develop by right, according to the standards we've written? Or are we comfortable with having to go through the PUD negotiation process with every development? There are some costs to that as well. I mean, and especially if you think about staff time and things of that nature, and just working through that with each developer, but it is definitely one way to do development.
And we do have development standards on some things, obviously, with sidewalks or certain paving and things that we could, if I find an interest in increasing those. PUD obviously gives you the ability to negotiate that a lot more than if you keep a standard. And I agree, I mean, I'm a big both sidewalks on both sides of the street guy, that's just me, and a park guy, but I think we can look at some of those things, we've talked about those over the last couple months, what we should be asking developers for, particularly the ones that do come in with the PUDs. Right now we're asking for parkland and trails are the 2 biggest things we always ask for, and maybe it's time to ask for sidewalks on both sides and whatever else the case may be. I don't think we can get into design standards, and that gets a little messy, but.
Let me ask, do all communities do PUDs?
I've never been in one that doesn't.
They're fairly common.
Okay.
I mean, it gives them the abilities PUD gives you the ability to change the standards without changing the whole standard. It takes an individual development piece of land. You don't have to change the zoning for it. You just do a planned unit development, and it allows you the freedom to change or allow signs or widths or whatever the case may be.
So it's well-known in the developer community that Forest Lake's looking for a PUD.
They're utilized by most developers who work in multiple communities are very familiar with the PUD process. It's usually somewhat similar between communities, or there's at least some expectations that things work the same. And I forgot the other last point I was gonna make, but
Are you finding even with the smaller, let's say, lot sizes, they're coming through for PUDs as well? Smaller density, you know, the
yeah,
larger
certainly,
density?
certainly the trend for residential development has been smaller lots, in a lot of communities. Sometimes their zoning ordinance doesn't quite keep up with some of the trends for development, and you know, things like decreased side yard setbacks, that was one thing that I had noted in the staff report. That's something that you'll frequently see. So I would say yes, they're commonly used for these smaller lots, yeah.
And the public neighborhood hearing you had today, that's a master PUD for the area, so they allow differences there. And that's already been developed however many years ago, so that's how that came to be.
Would you like the original plat book for that?
I have it, actually.
Because I found it
Yeah, we
a
have
couple weeks
that,
ago.
yeah. Saw it.
We need to clean out your house better.
My daughter has mentioned that to me several times.
Let's bring it back, bring it back.
Sorry, we're regressing.
Now that we've regressed all over the place, what else did you have in your presentation, Nathan?
Sure, so I had planned to talk about a few things. Density was one of them. I know that there's been a lot of conversation already at the meeting, so I don't necessarily want to go too far into detail on this, but I do want to touch it really quick. So the first slide that I'm showing here does present kind of a breakdown of the maximum units per acre that you would be able to see in a development with certain lot sizes. You want me to make it larger so you can see
Please,
it?
really old eyes.
All
Want a pair of
right, let's
glasses?
see what I can do here.
I got another pair.
No, I'm
Is this a little bit better?
getting there, yeah, that does help.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is kind of a breakdown. We have the current MXR1 minimum lot size, which is measured in square feet of 15,000. You can see that, I just took an example development, the one that we had a neighborhood meeting for, 60 acres, that specific development. So I just plugged in 60 acres. The rest of these two numbers are just constants. The estimated units per acre that you would see in a 60-acre development with that minimum lot size, without any public road infrastructure, without any parks, without any infrastructure, you would see a unit per acre count of 2.9 at a maximum conceivable. We go kind of scrolling across the board. I'll touch on a couple of these. At a minimum lot size of 10,000, you would see a maximum conceivable unit per acre count of 4.36. And then if we get down to 8,000, 7,000 area, 7,000 is what Hidden Creek is proposing with their development. And again, they're using the deviations that were approved in the Headwaters Master PUD. You would see a maximum conceivable unit per acre count of 6.2. And if we recall, the low to medium density future land use guides for between 3 and 6 units per acre. So on the next slide,
But,
go ahead.
but the other thing I want to say is, you're going from 174 homes to 373 homes.
Yep, that's correct. So yeah, and that's a good point.
You're tripling it.
So estimated number of units, and so that would correspond with obviously the unit per acre. So yeah, 370 plus units would be expected in maximum conceivable, right?
Which you probably never get to because you have infrastructure and all that, but
Right.
this shows you what the impact of a denser community
Oh, we're gonna be
is.
350.
So the next slide that I had prepared was just sort of, again, just building on a slide that I presented at the last meeting. I'm really just going to talk about the top box here that the cursor is circling. These are the 4 concept plans that we've reviewed they're at some stage of development currently. I just want to point out the densities that are in these developments because, of course, when talking about density, there's so many factors that actually impact the resulting density on any specific site. Each site has things like wetlands and how you orientate all of the roads and the buildings are going to be different. So you're going to see different resulting densities, but at the end of the day, we're seeing in circumstances where people are requesting smaller lot sizes, we're seeing 2 to 3 units per acre in some of these proposals at least. And obviously these proposals are concept plans, they're not approved plats, but it does help to kind of create some context for the discussion. So that was some of the information that I had prepared for you on density. And if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to take those. I'm gonna move on to the next kind of piece that I just wanted to touch before kind of ending this presentation to you. I'm gonna zoom out here.
Just really quick, Commissioner Chair, just wanted to let you know, Geneva had to go, she had to log off, so she's no longer in the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, so one of the things that I touched on in the staff report, and I did change in this slide, was simply to provide a range of side yard setbacks, 7.5 to 10 feet. And there's what is acceptable at a minimum, which, you know, in conversations with city staff, building official, fire chief, is 7.5 feet at the very minimum is what they said they were comfortable with. And there's what the city would prefer to see, which is 10 feet. And that's what I've heard on the basis of safety. I just wanted to bring this particular standard up because I do think that, you know, if the city were to change the other standards, this is another standard that you would expect to continue to see requests to deviate from. So if you're gonna have a smaller lot area, perhaps the lot width is different, you would expect developers to continue to request, like, for example, a 50-foot building pad is standard. So I think it's an important thing for the Planning Commission to discuss. I'm not necessarily going to argue one way or the other, but I do think it should be part of this overall discussion. So that was the information that I prepared for you. Another point from the staff report is design standards, and I had a couple points in there, but I think if the city does decide to go that route, it should be a different conversation than the MXR1. It's a big question of whether to do that, and there's a lot of other single-family zones to consider. The other thing that the city would want to do is really clearly understand what its goals are for design standards if it was going to go that route. So those are that's really all I have for you. I'm happy to take any questions.
And I printed this one. This was really helpful to me as I was thinking and because even if we don't go with the kinds of lot densities, we can still use PUDs to get attached and detached townhomes. If we're looking for that product for, you know, as a couple of people said, well, somebody doesn't want to take care of a yard. Okay, well, then we can still have the ability without having universal smaller lots to have those kind of products available for folks' consideration.
So, can we go back to the other, so this slide I think I've pretty well memorized it. The one with the 4 developments on it, this one here. So, as we look on this and we get our density, we see that these lots, this Hidden Creek one is, we're down to 7,000 square feet. Is that in Headwaters?
That was established in 2006 when that PUD was approved.
Yeah, before we leave that subject of that PUD, so we did a PUD, but then there was a land default, right?
Second part of that?
There was a land default? So-
No, what happened was the housing recession came.
Yeah, I know.
And he didn't so much default as he sold a bunch of it.
So the master plan goes with that,
Yes,
even when you sell a property?
Yes,
The
except the
PUD
new
it does,
developers keep coming in and saying, well, we don't want to do that, we want to change it.
I just want to understand that part, because I always hear this and I go, wait a minute, that's not really headwaters as we originally approved, so it's almost like a CUP then, that it runs with the land?
Yeah, so part of the PUD was developed, and so they basically established the PUD and it did not expire, so effectively, yes.
Thank you for that answer. It's been bothering me for days.
That was one of the first things that I looked at.
All right. So we're down smaller than what even I was happy with.
Like I said, we've got areas of the city already that if we want that, it's there. I'm just really concerned about saying that all of the MXR will be at, that's my concern.
Well, I understand. On the other hand, if you've got somebody living in a house and he's got a farm field behind him, and all of a sudden it gets down at this density, and he's expecting 15,000 square feet, I don't think you've necessarily done the adjoining landowners justice either. First, they're shocked that you're actually developing the property and not leaving it wild. I understand that.
Yeah, remember the,
There's been a number of them.
yeah.
All right, so,
And that was a question that a lot of those folks had tonight, is, you know, are those gonna be attached? Or how big are they gonna be? And what's that gonna do to my perceived value?
yeah, that did seem to be part of the questions. One thing I did want to show you is just on the screen now. It's I think there was a question of how big is the headwaters area and what does it all encompass? Everything you see on the screen here on this part that is being encircled, that is hatched, is part of that headwaters PUD area. So I don't know if that
Kind
was
of
a
down to
question.
195th, it ends there.
Yeah, that's the southern boundary. So this area that's kind of on the screen is one of the main subject properties for the Hidden Creek development.
And that's like 60 acres, Hidden Creek?
Yes.
I'm just trying to get a little scale here on, so we've got maybe not quite 200 acres left in that.
Well, if those are square miles there, there's 4 square miles below headwaters there. 4 1320 square quarter sections, right? Is that what no.
Acres is that?
Well, a section is 640. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
The whole
square
thing is-
miles, 640.
yeah. This is a 40 acre. Did they say that the light blue is?
That last square was almost 50 acres.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 200, 250 acres maybe.
At that density, yeah.
All right. I was just trying to figure how much is left of that thing. It just seems to go.
Yeah, we'd want to look at the PUD that was approved to understand what the approved kind of uses and the breakdown, because there is a little bit more to the density of the future development than just the.
Because it's different
single family.
densities depending where you're at in that
Right,
development.
yes, exactly. So the deviations may be different. We would have to review that.
Kevin, you look like you're ready to give us some profound thought.
What does the city want?
That's what you guys are talking about.
Well, we're only a few voices. I mean, you guys talk about it all the time because you have the developers coming in all the time. You know, you guys get to hear about a lot of stuff
Well,
before
there's a
we
lot,
even
I
get to
mean,
hear about it,
obviously, the developers try to convince you that the denser the better.
right?
But you've got some pretty experienced people sitting around the table that don't always take that as gospel, so. really think it comes down to what the development looks like and how it plays out and things like that, so.
Yeah, because I totally understand that when you're buying land today, obviously, the higher density, they can make the numbers work a lot better, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's a benefit to us.
And we will, I mean, we tell them what the standard is for whatever lot they, or what acreage they're wanting to develop, and tell them that we can't give them that variance, it has to come before a process, and that's when you start to get the site plan review and all that, so. But, you know, if it's an 80-foot lot area, we'll tell them it's an 80-foot lot area. Or if it's a PUD that they can handle this in headwaters, we'll tell them that that is. And most of the time, they come in with something entirely different and want to jam as much as they can in there, but that's just developers.
Again, I know what they want, but they're gonna go away. And we have a city and a community that I really want to be able to look myself in the mirror 20 or 30 years from now and say, yeah, what the decisions we made back then built a good community for the long haul.
Well, we did that already. Didn't we do that in our comprehensive plan?
Yeah, and then a big piece of it got midnight changed and yeah, we did a lot of that. We agonized over what areas should be zoned how.
Right.
And,
Would our esteemed council person care to weigh in? That would be you, Ms. Munson.
I know.
You gotta come up to a microphone though, so we all get to hear your
Yeah,
profound
if they get to hear
thoughts.
us, they get to hear you.
I don't want to say too much without not having discussed this at the council together, but I will say your discussion tonight is very informative. It's making me think, I mean, honestly, it's in the developers, it's their advantage. And if it's not going to do anything for the city, why would we make a change when we can do it through another avenue? Because we don't know what housing is going to look like 10, 15 years. Maybe we'll wish we never did that. That's my thought.
So when I spoke to the mayor about this and said I'd lead the charge to change the MXR1, so if you want to throw anyone under the bus, it's the short guy in the middle here. I think her request was, what should we be doing? I don't think that, I didn't get anything out of that meeting that we had with the joint meeting that said that we need to change anything. But smaller lot sizes, to me, seem like a solid plan, since it seems that a lot of our surrounding communities have smaller lots. I'm not 100% sold on it. I think Susan gives a great argument that let's put a little more work on the city and do all PUDs, because most of this stuff will be PUDs. And I'm not opposed to that plan if we flush out what it's going to take in order to get those densities smaller. And that's where we have failed really as a community. It doesn't matter who it is. There's been a lot of people on the planning commission, but we've been pretty, for lack of a better term, content with a trail going through, and that's what they consider the amenity that offsets shrinking the lots by 5,000 square foot apiece. Oh, we could easily ask Nathan, since he does all the work.
And Franny, too.
And Franny, it's good Franny's here, because she can keep Nathan honest. Because now that Nathan's a new homeowner, he'll need time off to paint and do chores and that
put
kind of stuff.
gardens into his side yards.
If he has some.
Setback's not too.
I
Yeah,
should
no
have
comments, no
Setbacks,
comments.
Yeah.
But I think it would be quite reasonable to look at the PUD direction and have some serious amenities brought forth. And if we get all of this, then we're willing to go down to X. But I think we need a little bit Dennis says, we need a little bit of a formula, right? That says, all right, they come in and say, we want smaller lots, and we go, what are we gonna get for it? But I think if we have the laundry list,
So you want us to come up with, if we consider PUDs and we consider smaller lots, some of the other amenities that we may demand out of a developer, such as sidewalks on both sides, trails,
Yeah.
parks.
that might just be a given.
Enhanced landscaping. Instead of a little 3-foot tree, we're looking for something that will help us be neighborhoods.
We will,
I was just gonna say, what's going on in the back of my head now is, how do I prepare information for you to act on moving forward? And so one of the maybe things that I could see being a benefit to you is reviewing the PUD standards at an upcoming meeting and explaining or understanding what the city's ability is through the PUD process to negotiate and what is reasonable to negotiate for.
I think that'd be fabulous.
Well, and Nathan, did you say, when we were just kind of talking about options, did you say it's possible we could look at designating certain areas within the MXR1 or other zoning where we could do something like this? So not making the MXR1 blanket these conditions, we could, certain areas, because I've been through cities where, you know, you have pockets where there's a lot of higher density and then not.
There's maybe some
Can you
other
not do that
tools
within the
to
zoning?
consider. I would wanna think about that a little bit more in depth.
Well, and through the PUD, we can, any place we can say, well, they want to do a,
The only reason I say designating is because sometimes you might have people that are just looking specifically for these densities that would attract them then. Now they might go, well, but we don't really like this area, what else do you have? And that might open the PUD discussion, where, you know, just blanketing the whole MXR1 as an example, saying, yeah, this is the densities. Maybe we could get, you know, more options by having designated areas, and even though they might not work, it might start the discussions. That's all I was thinking.
master planning.
You know, and I don't know if that's legal, not legal.
Legal's for the city.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. I figured Nathan knows.
When they come back and say, no, then we say, oh, okay, we'll have a new plan then.
I can tell you, take a look at it and try to understand what the options are for something like that.
there are a lot of other cities that are doing PUDs out there.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Some of them are pretty demanding.
If you have any in mind you'd like them to,
I need to think about that.
feel free to send them an email.
I don't have any
Anything-
business cards to hand you, but I would.
No, I know how to find you.
Other discussion on this topic this evening? Otherwise, are we good for now? Good? Done?
Yep.
All right. We've moved to our other. We'll start with our esteemed councilperson present. Anything you'd like to tell us this evening?
I have no update for you this evening.
Thank you. Franny?
I have nothing.
Nathan?
The next meeting that we have in January is looking like it's fairly stacked. Just thinking ahead to on the item we just talked about. I don't know that it would be productive to have that conversation at the last meeting in January, and would suggest that we do that at a future meeting.
That's no
Thank you.
problem. Yeah. They don't like this 10:30, 11 o'clock. I can get up anytime in the morning, so it doesn't matter to me.
We might be testing the limits again next week, or at the next meeting.
Without that.
Can you give us a preview of coming attractions?
Yeah, so we have a public hearing for a variance, 2 side yard setback, lot width, sorry. In the single-family district, we have a subdivision preliminary plat to review. We have a couple concept plans to review. Am I missing a public hearing?
There's a conditional use permit.
Additional use permit request for dog grooming services in.
For what?
For dog grooming services
Down on Lake.
on Lake Street.
Yeah, I thought you said dog moving service. I go, this I gotta hear more about.
Sorry, yeah. And I think that's the highlights.
Mr. Casey,
I have nothing.
Karen,
I have nothing.
Dennis?
Well, this is it for me tonight on this side of the bench. I spoke with the mayor and have decided not to
Re-up?
re-up. I've been doing it for 10 years and it's been a good run, and now it's time to,
Don't you go serve till the end of January?
well, I do, but I thought I served till the end of December, and I have scheduled something that's gonna take it through, next Wednesday, otherwise the 26th, which is the next.
Yep.
I apologize for that.
You've been on it, well, it's okay. You've been on the commission quite a while. Thank you for your service. You've done a great job. Can be a little cantankerous every now and then, but we all can. But you've brought a great perspective, many an evening to this meeting, so thank you for your service.
You may have shorter meetings from here on out.
Susan will still be here. Susan?
I told him earlier, I'm gonna miss this perspective because it's the more different ways that we have of looking at things and thinking about things, the better decisions we can make. So that's the only update I have, except February 19th, Rotary Plunge. If any of you know of a nonprofit that needs to raise some money, have we got a deal?
Thank you for that commercial. Kevin?
Nothing other than, Dennis, thank you. You've been, it's been fun to work with you here, and yeah, you do have a great perspective you bring, so we'll miss that.
I do have one announcement. On the 25th of January, that's a Tuesday evening, there will be a presentation on the downtown plan. I do not know if that's at 6 or 7 o'clock, but I know it's on the 25th.
On a Tuesday? I thought those always happened on Mondays.
Yeah, but we are putting it on Tuesday this time.
It begins at 7 p.m.
At 7 p.m. It'll be publicly noticed, and everyone on the planning commission is invited to attend. Here? Probably upstairs.
I believe so, yes.
So 7 o'clock on the 25th.
So this is the presentation of kind of the findings here of
Yeah,
the group?
it's the initial presentation of kind of the concept,
Okay.
to get some reaction to what the concept is.
That's all I have, so I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you all for your service this evening. Dennis, once again, thank you for your long commitment here.